came home smelling like bleach and stale coffee, my feet swollen so bad I had to walk out of my boots. And the first thing my son said was, "Can you keep it down, Dad? We're trying to relax." That's when I knew they didn't see me anymore. Not as their father, not as a man, just a provider they didn't want too loud. I didn't answer him. I just looked at the floor where I'd scrubbed out a grape juice stain that same morning, and then at the paper in my wallet. My pay stub from the late shift at the office building. Not much, but enough for what I needed to do. I went to the sink, rinsed my hands, took the stub, and walked straight to my room without a word. The hallway lights were off. I could hear the TV in the living room, laughter from whatever show they were watching. She liked those talent competitions. My daughter-in-law always yelling at the screen like she was a judge. I passed the laundry basket full of their clothes and didn't stop. I wasn't going to fold anything tonight. Not after that. Inside my room, which used to be the dining room before they took the bedrooms for themselves, I sat on the edge of the fold-out cot. My arms ached. The uniform shirt stuck to my back. I looked around at the space that was supposed to be temporary. Just until they got back on their feet, they said. That was 8 years ago. I remember the day they moved in. Brian had lost his job and Tanya was pregnant with their second. I didn't even hesitate. Of course, you'll stay here, I'd said. Family sticks together. I packed up my workshop so the kids could have more space, gave up my old armchair and radio, changed my schedule to be around for the baby, and now I was a nuisance with sore feet and a smell they didn't want near their couch. I reached for the drawer where I kept the mail, pulled out the old mortgage papers, the utilities, the bank statement, all still in my name because the house was mine. Paid off with decades of night shifts, overtime, aching muscles, and missed fishing trips. And yet, somewhere along the way, they'd started acting like I was the guest. I heard laughter again from the living room, Brian's voice, Tanya's too. No one asked if I wanted dinner. Not that I had the strength to eat. My dinner break had been a cold sandwich and half a can of lukewarm soda. I leaned back on the cot, one hand resting on the pay stub. It wasn't just tonight, it was every night. The slammed doors, the eye rolls, the complaints about how I loaded the dishwasher wrong. Tanya once told me I should stop dressing like a bum when I got home. I hadn't said a word then either, but tomorrow morning I'd speak quietly at the lawyer's office, and not with my voice, but with my signature. The day they moved in, I remember Tanya had on a yellow maternity dress and a sour expression, like my house already disappointed her. Brian carried in a box labeled important, and the first thing he did was ask where the outlets were so he could plug in their Wi-Fi router. Just until we find something, he said, patting my shoulder. A couple months tops. I believed him. He was my only son. I'd raised him after his mother died in '89, worked 2 jobs, took overtime whenever it was offered. He'd been a sweet boy once, shy, loved puzzles, used to crawl into bed with me during thunderstorms and ask about the stars. Now he was 35, jobless, and full of pride. I made up the dining room into a space for them, thinking it would be temporary. But Tanya didn't like that. There's no privacy, she said. So I moved out instead, gave up my bedroom, took the old cot in the front of the house. They called it adjusting. I called it disappearing. At first I didn't mind. I liked having the children around. Their oldest, Ava, was just starting preschool. She loved sitting in my lap, trying to comb my thinning hair with her tiny fingers. I cooked dinners, did laundry, ran errands while Tanya napped or went job hunting. But days turned into weeks and weeks into months. I started picking up evening shifts again as a janitor. Just a few at first, then more. The bills were creeping up. The electricity, water, food. Tanya liked name brand groceries. Brian liked streaming subscriptions. They didn't ask if I could afford it. I didn't say I couldn't. That first Christmas, I bought gifts for everyone. Brian gave me a mug that said Best Pop with the sticker still on it. Tanya gave me nothing. We figured the gifts were from all of us, Brian said. When the baby came, I took time off to help. Rocked her at night so Tanya could sleep. Paid for the crib, the diapers, even the hospital copay. I remember Tanya saying, "It's not like you have anything else to spend it on." Like my money was just lying around waiting for her needs to decide its worth. The months became years. They settled in, brought in more furniture, rearranged the living room without asking. Brian put his name on the mailbox. Tanya told the neighbors she was staying with her father-in-law until their place was ready, but no one ever looked. I missed my quiet mornings, my late-night radio, the smell of lemon polish on Sunday. Now there was always noise, always complaints. I once overheard Tanya whispering, "He's always in the way," like a stray dog you can't get rid of. And Brian, he said nothing. But I still cooked, still folded towels, still smiled when Ava hugged me because I thought that's what love was. Quiet, patient, unconditional. I didn't realize, not yet, that they'd taken my silence as permission. The smell followed me home every night. Bleach, stale coffee, floor wax. No matter how many times I showered, how much aftershave I used, it clung to my skin like a second name. Sometimes I'd stop just outside the front door, breathe in the night air, and try to convince myself that it was okay, that this was normal. Inside, the house was always warm and crowded. Toys scattered across the floor, Tanya's shoes by the couch, Brian's gaming headset draped over the armchair I used to sit in. They'd taken over every corner, the kitchen, the hallway closet, even my bookshelf. My things slowly moved out to the garage, unimportant, out of sight. I'd tiptoe through the house after a shift, careful not to wake anyone. One night I bumped into the kitchen chair and it scraped the floor. Tanya came out of the bedroom in her bathrobe, face twisted, like I'd ruined her evening. "Could you not make so much noise?" she hissed. "Some of us have early mornings." I almost laughed. She hadn't had a job in years. That night I didn't sleep much. I stared at the ceiling and counted how many hours I'd worked that week. 36, all evening shifts, all spent wiping counters, emptying trash, mopping floors with a smile while young supervisors barked complaints and managers hovered behind me, saying, "Pick up the pace, Frank." I hadn't told them at home how many shifts I took. What was the point? They'd never asked. Tanya once told me, "You should be grateful you've got something to do at your age. Most men just rot in front of the TV." She said that while I was carrying 4 bags of groceries she'd requested, oat milk, gluten-free waffles, organic fruit pouches for the kids, I'd use coupons, put back the salve for my arthritis to afford it, and still I brought it home with a smile. One evening I came in late, past 10, my arms sore from pushing the buffer, and they were all on the couch watching a show, laughing, snacking. The lights were dimmed. My favorite blanket, the one I used for years, was under the dog, Tanya's little mutt that wasn't housebroken. Brian looked up briefly and said, "Oh, hey, Dad," then turned back to the screen. I stood in the doorway holding my duffel, my lunch container still full. I hadn't eaten. We were slammed that night and breaks got skipped. My back felt like someone had taken a bat to it. I cleared my throat. "I think the sink's clogged again." Tanya didn't even look up. "Can it wait till morning?" "We're trying to relax," Brian added. "And maybe air out your uniform before coming in next time. The smell's a lot." The smell, I wanted to scream. "It's your dinner, it's your electricity, it's your roof." But I didn't. I just stood there holding my duffel and dignity like a shield and nodded. Later that night, I washed my uniform by hand in the garage sink. My fingers ached from the cold water. I didn't want to run the washer. It made too much noise. God forbid I disturb their sleep. While the shirt soaked, I sat on an old paint bucket and looked around. Boxes of their things lined the shelves. Decorations, baby clothes, Tanya's wedding dress in a dry cleaner bag, my stuff, a small crate in the corner, old photo albums, my father's Bible, a few letters from Sarah written in the early years of our marriage. I reached for the Bible and opened it at random. A verse stared back at me. Asterisk, "Do not cast your pearls before swine." I didn't believe in signs, not really, but the words settled into my bones. I'd given everything, my time, my money, my patience, and received crumbs of civility in return. And now, even my smell offended them. That night, for the first time in years, I didn't set an alarm, didn't get up early to make their breakfast or pack the kids' lunches. I slept. And when I woke up, I called the lawyer. "You're too soft on them," Loretta said, sipping her tea like it was a weapon. She was my neighbor for over 20 years, still lived 2 blocks down, and never minced words. "If I let my son talk to me the way yours does, I'd have boxed his ears long ago." We sat on her porch that Saturday afternoon, the kind where the sun heats your scalp and the shadows stay sharp. I'd stop by after picking up groceries, just an excuse to not go home, to not carry bags into a house where no one helped unload them. "They're just going through a hard time," I said, like I always did. But even I didn't believe it anymore. Loretta raised her eyebrows the way she always had when I was lying to myself. 8 years is a long, hard time," she said. I stared at her white wicker table, at the bowl of grapes she'd set out between us. Everything in her house was still hers, her rhythm, her rules. She didn't have people walking over her, taking up space and calling it help. "I don't want to cause a scene," I said quietly. They've got the kids. They don't have anywhere else to go. Loretta leaned in. Honey, you think you're protecting them? But what you're really doing is letting them bury you alive inch by inch. That silenced me because deep down I knew she was right. I'd been excusing, explaining, absorbing, not protecting, erasing. I called a lawyer, I said barely above a whisper. Loretta blinked. You did? Just to ask questions about rights, property stuff? Nothing more yet. She put her tea down and looked me straight in the eye. Good. That night I came home and found the kitchen trashed, sauce splattered on the stove, empty juice boxes on the counter, my mixing bowl in the sink, crusted with pancake batter, and a note stuck to the fridge. Dad, can you clean up before Ava's friends come over tomorrow? Thanks. No name, no please, just orders. I stood there a long time, the grocery bag still in my hands, my shoulders heavy, not just with weight, but with years. I walked to my room, sat on the cot, and stared at the ceiling. No one knocked. No one asked if I needed help. No one even noticed I was home. In the silence, I remembered something Sarah once told me back when we'd just moved into the house. I was scrubbing the garage floor while she was pregnant with Brian. She came in, took the broom from my hand and said, "This house isn't just walls, Frank. It's your legacy. Don't ever let anyone take it from you." I'd forgotten that until now. The next morning, I went into town and met with Mr. Levine, a quiet, balding man with a kind voice. He offered me coffee. I declined. "I need to know how to protect myself," I said, laying out the pay stub and utility bills. "My name's on everything, but they live there like it's theirs." He listened, asked questions, took notes. "You're within your rights to ask them to leave," he said. "You're the sole owner of the property. They have no legal claim." "And if they refuse," I asked, "we can begin formal eviction. It'll take time, a few notices, some paperwork, but it's doable and I'll handle everything." I sat there holding my duffel in my lap like a lifeline. "I'm not doing this out of anger," I said quietly. Mr. Levine smiled gently. "Most people don't. Most people do it because they have been pushed too far for too long." He handed me a folder. Inside were options, steps, empowerment in printed form. I took it home and placed it under my pillow. And for the first time in years, I slept without pain in my chest. The cold, breaded chicken wing hit my chest with a wet smack, straight from a plate someone hadn't bothered to finish. I looked down, a smear of sauce across the front of my freshly washed uniform, and then up. Mason, my grandson, 8 years old and old enough to know better, was grinning like he'd done something clever. "Oops," he said. Ava giggled behind her phone. "He was aiming for the mom." The dog barked once and darted under the table. Tanya didn't even turn from her laptop. "Mason," she said absently, "don't throw food, it's wasteful." That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement. I stood there, tray in my hands, having just brought out dinner for everyone. Baked chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans. No one had helped. No one had thanked me. I put the tray down on the counter slowly, picked up a paper towel and dabbed it at the stain. It was already setting, grease and tomato sauce. Great. Brian walked in, then sniffed the air. "Something smells off." I didn't answer. I wanted to tell him it was his son's behavior, that what stank wasn't dinner, but entitlement. But I just kept dabbing the spot. "You okay, Pop?" he asked, barely glancing at me. I nodded, because the truth was, I was past not okay. I was something else. Numb, maybe. Or maybe I'd finally hit the wall I'd spent 8 years inching toward. That night, I took the uniform off in the garage again, washed it in silence. My fingers cramped as I wrung it out. I thought about what Mr. Levine had said, how the process would start with a letter, a formal notice, 30 days. It sounded like a countdown to freedom. The next day, I stopped by the courthouse, picked up forms, made copies. It felt strange, like carrying a secret, a sharp one, hidden under my jacket. At the grocery store afterward, I didn't buy oat milk or fruit pouches, just tea bags and oranges for myself. When I got home, Tanya was on the couch in pajama pants eating ice cream from the tub. "We're out of the good coffee," she said without looking up. "Could you pick some up tomorrow?" I walked past her without a word. In the bedroom, I opened the file again, stared at the language. Asterisk notice to vacate, legal occupant, failure to comply. The words were blunt, unforgiving, like I'd have to become someone else to sign them. That night, I made dinner just for me. A quiet bowl of soup, ate it in my room with the door closed. The laughter from the living room felt far away, like it was happening in a house I didn't belong to anymore. At some point, Mason knocked. "Pop, can I have ice cream?" "You'll have to ask your mother," I said. He looked confused. but you always, not anymore. He blinked at me like I said something in another language, then turned and ran. Ava came in later, indignant. Why'd you upset him? I looked at her, a girl I used to rock to sleep, whose little hand had once clung to mine like I was her entire world, and said nothing, just closed the door. For the first time since they moved in, I put the lock on. The next morning, I mailed the notice. Certified mail, return receipt requested. When I got back, Brian was pacing in the front yard, phone to his ear. I'm telling you, man, he's acting weird lately. Maybe he's got dementia or something. I walked past him. He didn't look at me, and I thought, you're going to see just how clear my mind really is. The office building buzzed like a hive, intercoms chirping, timers going off, the floor buffer spitting wax like it had something to say. I moved through it all on autopilot, emptying trash, calling out spills, smiling just enough to pass. My body hurt in places I no longer listed. Shoulders, knees, wrists. By now, it was simpler to count what didn't ache. Frank, you good? Marcus, one of the new hires, barely 20, leaned on the counter beside me during a slow stretch. You've been quiet today. I wiped my hands on my apron and nodded. Just thinking. He whistled low. Man, I don't know how you do it. My feet are killing me, and it's only my third shift. You get used to it, I said. Though that wasn't quite true. You didn't get used to it. You just stopped complaining. There was no one to hear it anyway. Still, he said, looking at me like I was some kind of ancient warrior, you shouldn't have to be working this hard. I smiled faintly. Life doesn't ask what you should or shouldn't have to do. It just hands you a mop and says, keep moving. He laughed. That's deep, Mr. Frank. I didn't feel deep. I felt like my back was made of rusted metal and someone had dropped a bowling ball on my ankles. But I kept standing because standing meant I wasn't lying flat somewhere, forgotten. During break, I sat alone in the back room. Everyone else scrolled their phones or complained about supervisors. I ate my sandwich quietly, rereading the confirmation email from the post office. The eviction notice had been received. 30 days, 29 now. I should have felt something big, triumph, fear, doubt, but mostly I felt calm, a strange, unfamiliar calm, like I'd finally stopped treading water and decided to swim towards something, even if I didn't know what. The night went on. Tasks kept coming. At one point, someone spilled a tray of drinks, and I bent down to help mop it up. My knees cracked loudly. Marcus winced. That sound came from you? Don't act so surprised, I said, chuckling. He grinned, then hesitated. Hey, can I ask something personal? I looked up. You got kids? The question landed harder than I expected. Yes, I said simply. He nodded like he'd guessed. They help you out like with stuff? I straightened up slowly. No, they live with me. I help them. He blinked. Oh, that's cool, I guess. Cool. I didn't correct him. Didn't say they've taken everything I've offered and forgotten to say thank you. Didn't say I'm working this shift so they can watch Netflix on my electricity and sleep in beds I gave up for them. I just said yeah and went back to wiping down the counter. By closing time, I was exhausted down to the marrow. The manager offered to walk me to my car. I declined. My car wasn't there. I'd taken the bus again. Too expensive to keep gassing it up when Tanya refused to chip in for anything. The night air hit me like a splash. Cool, crisp, honest. I stood at the bus stop and looked at my hands. The same hands that had held Brian when he was sick. Braided Ava's hair. Rolled dough for Sarah's favorite peach cobbler. Now they trembled slightly from the long shift, but not from weakness, from decision. When I got home, the porch light was off again. I fumbled with my keys in the dark, stepped over a scooter in the walkway. Inside, the house was silent. The kind of silence that doesn't ask where you've been. No one stirred. I walked past the living room and saw the mess. Empty soda cans, socks on the floor, someone's greasy plate on the coffee table. I didn't clean it. I went to my room, pulled out the file from under the pillow, and started filling out the next forms Mr. Levine had given me. The countdown had begun, and I wasn't backing down. The waiting room at Levine and Marsh was small, quiet, and smelled faintly of lemon polish. I sat on a stiff gray chair, hands folded in my lap, papers stacked neatly in my duffel. Across from me, a man in a blue suit scrolled his phone, oblivious. I wondered if he could tell that today was different for me, that this wasn't just another errand, that this was the first real step. Mr. Levine called me in promptly at 10 o'clock. His office was tidy, lined with books that looked touched, not just for show. He greeted me warmly, gestured to the chair opposite his desk, and waited until I settled. "You ready to begin?" he asked. I nodded. He opened a folder labeled with my name. "We've got confirmation of receipt on the 30-day notice. That clock is officially ticking." I exhaled slowly. "And if they don't leave, then we file for formal eviction," he said. Calm, professional. "It can take a few more weeks, maybe a month, but the law is on your side." I stared at my hands, the skin thinner now, the veins like riverbeds. I've never done anything like this. Never taken something from someone. "You're not taking," he said, "you're reclaiming." I didn't respond. Not because I didn't agree, I did, but because hearing it from someone else made it real. He walked me through the next steps, the documentation, the notarized signatures, the court filing schedule. I nodded, took notes, signed where needed. As we wrapped up, he leaned back in his chair. "You sure you're okay with this?" I looked him in the eye. "No, but I'm more okay than I've been in years." When I got home that afternoon, the house was empty. Tanya had taken the kids to some indoor play center, judging by the note on the counter. Brian was probably working a gig, which usually meant playing cards with his friends. I made myself tea, sat at the kitchen table, and opened the folder. Everything was in place, the legal backbone of a decision I'd made in silence. Standing in a brightly lit office, pushing a buffer, wondering when exactly my voice had stopped mattering. I didn't hear the front door open, but I heard Brian's voice soon after. He was on the phone laughing, talking loudly as he walked in. "Yeah, he's out, I think. Probably off buying more soup. You know how he is." He stepped into the kitchen and froze when he saw me. "Oh, hey, Dad," he said, slipping the phone into his pocket. "Didn't know you were back." "I had an appointment," I said. "Doctor." "No." He waited, but I didn't explain further. Just sipping my tea and looked at him. Something about my stillness must have unnerved him. He scratched the back of his neck. "You okay?" "I'm fine." A pause. "Then look, if it's about the dishes or whatever, I was going to—" "It's not." He stood there, shifting his weight like a boy again, caught in some mischief. "You're mad about something." I raised an eyebrow. "What would I be mad about?" He shrugged but didn't answer. I stood, collected the folder, and walked to my room. I didn't slam the door, didn't raise my voice, but I knew he'd start to wonder. They all would. And wondering was the first step toward realizing. That night, after they were all in bed, I went out to the porch. The air was warm, the stars sharp. I sat in Sarah's old rocking chair and stared into the dark. The house was still behind me for now, but not for long. I started with the gas bill. It was still in my name, of course. Every utility, every service. I'd never change that, not even when Brian offered half-heartedly to take some of the load. The truth was, he didn't want the responsibility. He just wanted to pretend like they were contributing. I logged into the account and changed the password, then the electric, then the water. Each click felt like cutting a thread that had once held me bound, not out of spite, out of clarity. The last was the Wi-Fi, Tanya's lifeline. I saw the streaming history, hours of cooking shows, home renovation series, some true crime documentary about women who snap. I paused, then changed that password too. Next came the bank. I went down in person, walked into the branch wearing my best button-down, the one with the tiny blue check, and waited patiently in line. The teller was polite, young, maybe 25. She smiled when I explained what I needed. "I'd like to close all joint access," I said. She blinked. "Do you have a power of attorney on file?" "Yes," I said, "and I'm here to revoke it." A few forms later, it was done. Brian would no longer have access to my savings, checking, or retirement. Tanya's Amazon orders, which had been linked to my debit card, would bounce. So would the subscription for that fancy meal kit she liked, the one she always left me to unpack and store. The teller handed me the updated paperwork. "Anything else we can do for you today?" I shook my head. "I've done quite enough." I walked out into the sunlight and felt something strange in my chest. Not guilt, not hesitation, something lighter, maybe relief. When I got home, no one noticed. Tanya was in the backyard scrolling her phone while the kids screamed around her. Brian was in the garage poking around his old tool chest, probably looking for something he wouldn't fix. I passed them both without a word. In the kitchen, I sat with my tea and wrote a list. Everything I'd covered over the years. Car insurance, school fees, groceries, rent in essence, though they never called it that. I underlined one sentence, asterisk. None of it was free. All of it cost me. I taped the list to the fridge. At dinner, they noticed it. Tanya read it first, frowned. "What's this supposed to mean?" Brian looked over her shoulder, then back at me. "You mad about something, Pop?" "No," I said, "just clarifying." He laughed nervously. Okay, she muttered. Passive-aggressive much. But she didn't rip the note down. Not yet. She knew better than to test me when I got quiet. That night around 11, the Wi-Fi cut out. I heard her groan through the wall. Frank, the internet's down. I didn't answer. A minute later, Brian knocked on my door. Dad, something's up with the router. I know, I said. Silence. You going to fix it? No, I said calm. It's no longer in service. A beat. What does that mean? It means, I said gently, that what's mine is mine again. And then I turned out the light. It started small, little shifts in atmosphere. Tanya slammed cabinets louder. Brian lingered in the kitchen like he wanted to ask something, but couldn't find the words. The kids tiptoed around me more, uncertain. No one said anything outright, not yet. They thought it was a phase, a bad mood. They didn't know I'd canceled more than just the Wi-Fi. On the third day, Tanya confronted me over laundry. I couldn't get into the online payment system for the utility bills, she said, standing in the hallway in her robe. Did you change the login? Yes, I said. She waited. So can you give it to me? No. Her mouth fell open slightly. What do you mean, no? I mean, it's no longer your concern. She scoffed. What's that supposed to mean? I didn't answer. I stepped past her, a basket of folded towels in my arms, the last ones I'd ever do for them. She didn't follow. Later that afternoon, Brian came into the kitchen with his hands in his pockets, the way he used to when he was caught lying as a teenager. Pop, can we talk? I was peeling apples for a pie, not for them, just for me. I'm listening, I said. I'm just trying to understand what's going on. I kept peeling. What do you mean? He shrugged. I mean, the Wi-Fi is gone, the bills are locked. You're acting like, I don't know, like we're strangers. I placed the peel aside, reached for another apple. I don't think I'm acting. I think I've just stopped pretending. He rubbed his neck. Okay, so what? You're mad about the chicken thing or the note? Or what did Tanya say? I'm not angry, I said calmly. I'm finished. With what? I looked up at him. With being the janitor, the wallet, the background noise. His mouth opened, closed. Okay, so you're just cutting us off. I laid the knife down gently. I'm reclaiming my life, Brian. You've had 8 years of it. He blinked. Where's this even coming from? Is this about Mom? That stopped me. I stared at him. Don't bring your mother into this. She'd be ashamed of how you've treated me. Brian flinched. Good. Some things needed to be said. Later that night, they had a conversation in the bedroom. I heard the muffled voices. Tanya was angry. Brian kept saying, calm down. At one point, the door opened and she stormed out, brushing past me in the hallway. You want war, Frank? She hissed. Fine. I went back to my tea. War? I'd already won. The next day, she posted on Facebook, some people forget what family means, but God sees everything. I didn't reply. Brian knocked on my door around dinner time. We need to talk, all of us. I met them in the living room. The kids were at the neighbors. Tanya sat stiff-backed. Brian paced. You're making this house really uncomfortable, he said. It's my house, I replied. Right, and you're throwing that in our face now after everything we've done for you. I tilted my head. What exactly have you done for me? He hesitated. Tanya jumped in. We've been here. We've supported you. We've kept you company. Supported me? You'd be alone otherwise? She said, folding her arms. I nodded slowly. Yes, I'd be alone with quiet respect and clean sinks. Brian held up a hand. Look, let's just be reasonable. I was reasonable for 8 years. He exhaled. So what? You want us to leave? I've already started the process. Their faces changed then. Real fear. Tanya's jaw clenched. Brian looked like someone had slapped him. You what? He asked. Eviction, I said. 30 days, 20 left. Tanya stood up. You're insane. No, I'm awake. I left the room and closed the door behind me. They could rage, post, gossip. It didn't matter because the house had started to feel like mine again. The letter came on a Thursday. Plain envelope, court seal in the corner. I placed it neatly on the hallway table where I knew they'd see it. I didn't hide, didn't wait. I just brewed my tea and sat by the window, watching the maple tree sway gently outside. Brian found it first. I heard the rip of the envelope, the shuffle of papers, the sudden intake of breath. Dad, he shouted, what the hell is this? I didn't move. A moment later, he was in the kitchen, waving the paper like it was on fire. You're suing us. You filed for eviction. I looked at him. I warned you. You didn't warn us. You didn't say you were serious. I didn't think I needed to say it again. He paced the kitchen floor like a caged animal. Where are we supposed to go? Huh? You think we've got money for first and last month's rent just lying around? I raised my cup. You've had 8 years. Tanya came in then, hair pulled back tight, fury written on her face. You're heartless, she spat. After all we've done. Stop, I said, quiet but sharp. Don't say that again. Don't pretend you've given more than you've taken. She opened her mouth, but I didn't let her speak. You live in my home, eat my food, spend my electricity. You leave your mess for me to clean, your children for me to raise, and you've never once, not once, said thank you. Brian looked away. Tanya's jaw tightened. You want us homeless? She hissed. I want you out of my house, I said. You can call it whatever you like. They stormed out of the room. For a moment, the silence rang like a bell. Later that night, I found a note on my door hastily scribbled in Tanya's messy print. You're going to regret this when you're old and alone. I read it, folded it, threw it away. That weekend, they stopped pretending. No more forced small talk, no more fake politeness. They avoided me in the hallway, didn't clean up after themselves at all, let the trash overflow, turned up the TV loud at night. Tanya accidentally used my special coffee mug and left it in the sink. Cracked. I said nothing. I cleaned nothing. I stopped cooking, stopped folding, stopped picking up the broken pieces they left behind. And still the days ticked by. 19, 18, 17. They thought they could wear me down, that if they acted badly enough, I'd cave. I'd go back to the quiet servant in the corner. But they didn't understand. Once a man starts choosing himself, there's no going back. Not even for family. Court was set for 9 a.m. family division. I arrived early, wore my good Navy suit jacket, the one I'd kept pressed in plastic for weddings and funerals. This felt like both. Mr. Levine met me outside the courtroom. He looked over the papers one last time, calm as ever. They filed no formal objection, he said, but they're coming. Just be yourself, be honest. That's more than enough. I nodded. Inside, the courtroom was plain. Wooden benches, pale walls, a faint smell of stale coffee and paper. I sat on the left. Brian and Tanya came in 5 minutes before the hour. She wore a tight blazer and too much perfume. Brian didn't look at me. The judge, a woman with steel gray hair and a voice like clean glass, called the case. Frank Matthews versus Brian and Tanya Matthews. Petition for eviction. We stood, introduced ourselves, then sat again. Mr. Matthews, the judge said, you are seeking to evict your son and his family from a property you own solely in your name. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. On what grounds? They have lived in my home for over 8 years without paying rent, contributing to expenses, or respecting house rules. I provided them shelter as family. That arrangement has reached its end. She nodded. Do they have a lease agreement? No. Have they paid any utilities or made financial contributions of any kind? No, ma'am. Brian shifted in his seat. Tanya muttered something under her breath. The judge looked at them. Do you contest the facts? Brian cleared his throat. Your Honor, we're family. This shouldn't be a legal matter. We've lived there for years. My father never said he wanted us out. Not until recently. The judge raised an eyebrow. Did you assume you had permanent rights to his property? No, I mean, we thought we had time. We've got 2 kids. We didn't expect. Tanya jumped in. He's being vindictive. We're all adults, sure, but he's still their grandfather. Doesn't that count for anything? The judge looked back at me. Why now? I didn't look at them. I looked at the judge, and I spoke plainly. Because I stopped mistaking my quiet provision for love. I stopped accepting disrespect in exchange for my hard-earned peace. I've given all I could, time, money, care, and it only made them take more. I didn't want this, but I won't be erased in my own home. The courtroom was silent. Even Tanya didn't speak. The judge turned to Mr. Levine. All documents are in order? Yes, Your Honor. She nodded once firmly. Judgment granted. Petition approved. The defendants have 10 business days to vacate the property. If they fail to do so, sheriff-assisted removal will follow. Her gavel struck once. Clean, final. Tanya gasped. Brian stared at the desk. I stood slowly, my hands were steady. Outside, they followed me to the parking lot. You really did it, Brian said, his voice low. You actually went through with it. I did. We're your family, Dad. I'm aware. Tanya folded her arms. You'll be sorry when you're old and alone. I met her eyes. I've been old for a while, Tanya, but I haven't been alone. Not until you moved in. They didn't follow me to the car. I drove home in silence. No music, no talk radio, just the sound of the engine and the wind. When I turned onto my street, I saw the maple tree in front of the house, the one Sarah planted after Brian was born, swaying gently in the afternoon breeze. The house stood there, waiting, and for the first time in years, it felt like it was waiting for me. The moving truck arrived at 8:42 a.m. It was one of those rented ones, paint peeling from the side, engine coughing as it backed into my driveway. I stood by the kitchen window, mug in hand, watching them pile things into the back. Boxes, laundry baskets, 2 bicycles with bent wheels. Tanya barked orders while scrolling her phone. Brian carried things one at a time, slow, like if he moved slowly enough, the clock might reverse. No one knocked on my door. No one asked to borrow tape or a hand. It was better that way. I'd cleared the hallway already, moved my things, what little I had. Back into the bedroom I gave up 8 years ago. The cot in the dining room was folded and covered, waiting to go to Goodwill. I had vacuumed that morning. Not for them, for me. Around 10, I heard footsteps approach the kitchen. Brian stood in the doorway, arms crossed. He looked smaller somehow, not in size, but in stature, like the weight of consequence had finally landed. "We'll be out by noon," he said. I nodded. "You sure this is what you want?" I met his eyes. "It's what I need." He shifted his weight. "The kids don't understand." "They will," I said softly. "One day." He nodded, jaw tight. "You won't even say goodbye." "I've said goodbye, Brian, more times than you noticed. Every night I came home from work and you didn't ask how I was. Every time I made dinner and ate alone. Every birthday you forgot. Every kindness you treated like a service owed." He looked away. "I'm not angry," I added. "I just won't disappear for you anymore." He left without another word. By 11:30, the house was quiet again. The truck door slammed. I heard Tanya shouting for Ava to buckle her seatbelt. The car engine started, then paused, then a knock. I opened the door. Ava stood there, my oldest grandchild, 10 years old now, hair in a braid I used to do for her before school. She looked up at me, eyes uncertain. "Pop." "Yes, baby." "Can I have a hug?" My throat tightened. I stepped out onto the porch and wrapped her in my arms. "Where are you going?" I asked gently. She shrugged. "Mom said we're staying with a friend, but it's a small house." I knelt to her level. "It won't always be like this, but you'll be okay. You're strong and smart, and you'll remember what kindness looks like." She nodded slowly. "Will I still see you?" I smiled. "That's up to your parents, but I'll be right here. This is still my home." She hugged me again, tighter this time. Then she ran down the steps back to the car. Tanya didn't look at me. Brian didn't wave. The car pulled away. The truck followed, and then the street was still. I walked back inside, closed the door, listened to the silence. It didn't feel empty. It felt clean. I sat on the edge of my reclaimed bed and looked around the room. My quilt on the bed, my picture of Sarah on the nightstand, my scent in the air, not bleach and someone else's perfume. I had not won a war. I had come home, and no one would take that from me again. The house creaked differently now, not from footsteps overhead or the TV blasting in the living room, not from Mason's scooter banging into the baseboards or Tanya's heels on the tile. It creaked like old wood finally breathing again, like walls that could settle without the strain of too many voices. I wandered from room to room that afternoon, not with a checklist, but with curiosity, as if seeing my own home for the first time in years. The hallway smelled faintly of lemon, the way it used to when I had time to clean on Sundays. Their things were gone. No toys in the corners, no jackets thrown over chairs. Even the smell had changed. The air was lighter. In the living room, I found a few crumbs under the couch cushions, a half-broken toy car, and an empty chip bag. I picked them up calmly, like closing a chapter with my hands. No anger, just quiet. The fridge was nearly bare. I hadn't done a proper grocery trip in weeks. Too caught up in documents, steps, decisions. I opened the door and made a list out loud, just for myself. Eggs, milk, not oat, real milk this time, apples, maybe some peanut nut butter. I laughed softly. It sounded strange in the quiet. The dining room was empty now, the cot folded, the makeshift shelves taken down. I stood in the center, remembering nights I'd laid there, listening to Tanya whisper complaints into her phone. Mornings I'd woken before dawn to make lunches that went unthanked. I didn't regret any of it, but I wouldn't repeat it. The kitchen sink gleamed. I'd scrubbed it after they left, not out of habit, but as a kind of ritual. I polished the faucet, put the good tea towels back on the hooks, the ones I kept in the drawer because Tanya thought they were too old-fashioned. It was all old-fashioned now. The pace, the quiet, the dignity. That evening, I sat on the porch with a cup of mint tea, the same rocking chair Sarah used to claim as her own. The air was cool, touched with spring. Across the street, the neighbor's porch light flickered on. Loretta's car wasn't in the drive, probably off at her daughter's. I'd tell her everything later. Not now, now was just for me. I closed my eyes and listened. Not for voices, but for the lack of them. No cartoons blaring, no stomping, no sighing from behind doors. Just wind in the maple branches, distant birds, the occasional bark from someone's dog 2 streets over. It was almost too peaceful, but only almost. When the sky dimmed, I came inside, turned on one lamp in the living room, and pulled out the old quilt I'd made back in the '95. Blue and yellow squares, faded but warm. I curled into the corner of the couch, my couch, and let my shoulders relax fully for the first time in months. No one asked me to move. No one reminded me of the remote. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't need noise. I opened the book I'd left on the end table weeks ago, the one I'd never had time for, and read until the words blurred. My eyes burned, not from fatigue, but from the unfamiliar feeling of being unneeded. And it wasn't sorrowful. It was sacred. Before bed, I took one last walk through the house, checked windows, turned off lights, listened for nothing. I stopped by the hall mirror, looked at the man staring back. He didn't look triumphant. He looked returned to himself, to his space, to his name, Frank. Not Dad, not Pop, not could you, just Frank. And he was enough. The letter came on a Wednesday. A real letter. Paper, envelope, handwriting. Not a bill, not a flyer. I hadn't seen my name written in pen in a long time. Asterisk, dear Uncle Frank, asterisk, in soft cursive blue ink. I brought it inside like something fragile. Sat at the kitchen table, put on the kettle, and opened it with care. Asterisk, dear Uncle Frank, asterisk. I hope you're well. I've been thinking about you a lot lately. My aunt said she saw Tanya's post online, and I realized I hadn't reached it out in far too long. I don't know what happened exactly, but I know you, and I know you don't act without reason. I'm writing to ask something, but only if it feels right for you. I'm finishing my nursing program next month, and I'm looking for somewhere quiet to stay while I prepare for exams and figure out what's next. Would you consider letting me stay with you for a while? I can pay rent, help around the house, cook, anything you need. Mostly I just want to be near someone who feels like home. Asterisk love, Mel Marfaro asterisk. I read it 3 times. Melissa, my sister-in-law's daughter. I hadn't seen her in 2 years, not since her mother's funeral. She'd grown quiet since then, but not cold. I remembered her as a child, always watching, always thinking. She'd helped me make cookies, asked deep questions about life while stirring batter. I used to say she had an old soul. Maybe it was just a kind one. I sipped my tea and let the idea settle. The house didn't feel lonely. It felt mine, but there was room, more than enough. And maybe it wasn't about filling it. Maybe it was about sharing it with someone who wouldn't try to claim it. Later that afternoon, I called her. She picked up after 2 rings. Hi, Uncle Frank. Hello, baby. Got your letter? She sounded nervous. Yeah, I wasn't sure if... You're welcome, I said. You always were. Silence on the line, then a small, honest breath. I can help with groceries, she said quickly, and clean, and I'll stay out of your way. You don't have to sell yourself to me, Mel. Just bring yourself. That's enough. She exhaled. Okay, I'll come this weekend, if that's all right. It is. After we hung up, I stood in the hallway and looked around, not with dread, with readiness. I went to the guest room, the one Tanya and Brian used to argue in, and opened the windows, let the air shift, washed the sheets, dusted the bookshelf. I found an old lamp in the garage, one with a floral base Melissa once said looked like something from a fairy tale. I cleaned it, placed it by the bed. When I finished, I stood in the doorway and looked at the space. It didn't feel like recovery. It felt like welcome. That night, I cooked something I hadn't in years, chicken and dumplings. Just for myself, but I made enough for 2. The recipe was in my head, passed down from my own mother, who used to hum while she stirred. I didn't hum, but I remembered. As the stew simmered, I set the table for 2. No one came yet, but I didn't feel foolish. I felt ready. By morning, I'd gone through the closets, found old towels, set out extra hangers. There was joy in it. Not urgency, not servitude, joy. Because this time, no one was taking anything, and what was given would be chosen. Melissa arrived just before noon on Saturday. She drove an old hatchback with a dented bumper and everything she owned packed into 3 boxes and 1 duffel bag. No drama, no loud voices, just the sound of gravel under tires and a gentle knock on my door. I opened it, and there she stood, taller than I remembered, thinner with tired eyes, but the same soft smile. Uncle Frank, Melissa. We hugged on the porch. No tears, just warmth. Inside, she walked slowly through the house, taking it in. She didn't say much, just looked at the newly cleared living room, the kitchen with its quiet hum, the guest room now hers. She ran a hand over the quilt I'd laid out, the one my mother made in the 70s. It's beautiful, she said. I shrugged. Just old fabric. She looked at me. You kept it. I keep what matters. That night, we had dinner at the table. 2 plates, 2 cups, no TV blaring, no arguments in the hallway. Just 2 people, different generations eating in peace. She asked about Sarah. I told her stories. She laughed at the one about the raccoon in the garage and how I tried to chase it with a broom, swearing like a sailor the whole time. She asked about her mother. I gave her the truth, not the glossy version, the stubbornness, the loyalty, the way she always cut the crust off her toast, even at 40. I miss her, Melissa said quietly. I do too. Later, we did the dishes together. No one asked. It just happened. In the days that followed, she settled in like someone with respect, for space, for rhythm, for silence. She cooked once a week, helped in the yard, offered to take the trash out without being asked, not to earn her keep, just because she saw the work. One morning, I found a sticky note on the fridge. Don't touch the groceries. I'm buying them this week. Sit down. You've earned it. I chuckled, peeled it off, and saved it in my drawer. It wasn't perfect. She had her own stresses. Late nights with textbooks, sees at her laptop when the loan payments came due. But we shared the space like grown individuals. No one owed, no one begged. Just 2 people living side by side, choosing to care without swallowing themselves. One afternoon, I caught her staring at me while I folded towels. What is it? I asked. She shook her head. Owen. I just keep thinking how different it must feel now, not having to, I don't know, carry everything. I nodded. It feels like breathing in a room that used to be full of smoke. She said nothing for a while. Then, do you regret it? The eviction? No, not even a little. I looked out the window. The maple tree was full again. New leaves, sunlight caught between them like gold netting. I thought of Brian as a boy. His small hands, his love of puzzles, the way he used to rest his head on my chest when he was sick. I regret that I had to do it, I said, but not that I did. She nodded slowly. Later that week, she helped me put new flowers in the front yard, marigolds like the ones I had in '92. She brought gloves for both of us. We knelt side by side planting, patting the soil down with care. You ever think about writing this all down? She asked, brushing dirt from her sleeves. What for? People need to hear stories like yours, real ones, not just revenge tales or sad endings, stories with backbone, with choice. I smiled. Maybe, but stories like mine don't shout. They sit quiet in kitchens, in rocking chairs, in silence that used to be noise. She stood, brushed off her jeans. Still, I think you should tell it, or I will. I laughed. Then make sure you get the smell of the disinfectant right. Now the house is steady again. Melissa passed her exams. She'll be moving into her own apartment next month. Not because I asked her to, because she's ready, but she says she'll come by Sundays. She wants to keep the tea ritual going. I believe her, Sometimes I sit on the porch and think about everything that happened, the years I gave away, the voice I nearly lost, the night I stood in the garage, hands in cold water, and decided I wouldn't be invisible anymore. And I'm glad I chose me. If you're reading this, maybe you're standing in your own hallway. Maybe your voice has been quiet for too long. Maybe you've been mistaken for furniture in your own life. Let me say this plainly. You're not too late. You're not too old. You're not asking for too much. You can take it back. Your room, your name, your place at the table. Start with one no, or one signature, or one truth spoken out loud. The rest will follow. And if this story meant something to you, share it. Leave a comment. Let someone else feel less alone. We're not invisible. We're just getting started.